Start. Thank you all for being here again just before the holidays. So I'm really happy that today we have with us Bart van den Heuvel from Tekkoo. And he will be talking about redefining progress, the circular factory vision of for a sustainable future. And I've looked at the website of Tekkoo because I didn't know about Tekkoo before. And one of the things that is mentioned here is on This Is What We Do, it says that as entrepreneurial innovators, we turn global challenges into business opportunities. Now, I've already learned that you're not allowed to talk about problems anymore. You should talk about challenges, but you take it one step further. You make from challenges, you make opportunities. So I'm really happy that you are here, Bart, and I'm just interested to hear what you will present to us.
Okay, yeah. So thank you for introducing me. Thank you for having me today. Seeing opportunity in challenges. I would say, let's say, maybe recent developments somewhere in the Middle East have given us more hope that business opportunities are very much within working on a sustainable future. And that's what we do. So recently, if people ask me what I do, I say it is something like a transition consultant. I think that more or less says it quite well. And within Tekkoo, we do everything around addressing these challenges, so everything related to SDGs. And I focused on circular economy, clean tech or sustainable energy. I think that sort of in a broad sense defines what we do. So we do that for corporates, so we advise them on how to innovate towards that circular economy, or at least get them more future-proof or improve their business models for the future. But also a part of that is programs we run with startups. So the pace of innovation by startups is higher than what we see in corporates. And actually that way of working within startups, so that very agile way of working, really quickly adapting to what you learn and what is happening in a market, is also what we translate to those corporates. So really that way of thinking and working. So let's say as quickly as possible towards impact. Part of that is the Circular Factory program, so I'll tell much more about that. It's a cooperation between Tekkoo and Blue City. I'm currently in Blue City, not too far away from you. Well, at least on Dutch scales, it's too far to bike. But in the middle of Rotterdam, and it's a former swimming pool that has been transformed into a circular economy hotspot, as they refer to it themselves. So everything around that circular economy. And with them, we're running the Circular Factory program. So I'll dive into that. So a short overview of the why, the how, and also the call to action towards you. So always looking for people to contribute to our mission. This is a slide I just added. So I tend to forget to introduce myself. So this is my name. This is what I do. So I also do investment management. We have a little investment fund for pre-seed companies in circular economy and clean tech. I run the Circular Factory program together with a team. Studied innovation management in Eindhoven, that is. Mostly worked in anything that has to do with innovation and impact. That's what I love to do. Did I go kite surfing yesterday? No, on Monday. So quite addicted to wind and water. Even when it's 5 degrees, there's no bad weather, there's only bad clothing. So Circular Factory, this is what we do. So getting from pilot to a demo plant. I'll explain the stages a bit more, but around that we also build on strong collaborations. So the idea is there's no ecosystem yet for circular factories. There's no tailored support for anyone that wants to build a factory to actually produce something. And to make that what we see as the next industrial revolution going, we need to build that ecosystem. So I'll explain a bit more the background, how we got to this, but we have support from, amongst others, InvestNL, but also a waste-to-product company called Renewy, one of the big waste-to-companies or waste-to-product companies in the Netherlands. We collaborate with a whole lot of partners within this field to really create that ecosystem. It's very difficult to build a venture that wants to do actual production. So when most people refer to a startup, it's has something to do with software. Let's say I'm not interested in those ventures at all. Some maybe that address real challenges, but the next Airbnb off or the Uber off, I'm not interested in that at all, because let's say impact is what we need. We need a different economic model, and that is what we strive for here. So a bit of the founding story. Tekkoo, like I said, works as transition consultants. And then they stumbled upon this idea of using orange peels as a food ingredient, or at least getting ingredients out of that waste stream. And that's where they started a venture called Peel Pioneers. So this is the picture of the team when they raised 10 million euros for the next plant. They work together with, maybe you can see the logo on the truck, a company called Renewy. So they do the logistics almost all around the country, because this is the problem. Actually, here in the Rotterdam harbor, they are still here, but they used to be fuller. Tanks full of orange juice that has been dehydrated, or at least partly. So it's pressed in mostly South America. Then the juice is, I don't know what we call it in English, but water is taken out. Then we would add the water here, and that's what we used to buy in supermarkets. But let's say for the last 10 years, fresh orange juice is everywhere. So probably during Christmas breakfast, everybody will be drinking this again. But what we actually are doing is shipping a lot of waste across the ocean, because those peels end up everywhere, and the volumes are unbelievable. So it's truckloads a day. 250 million kilograms of peel in the Netherlands alone is our estimation that is within that market. And in a circular economy, there is no waste. So the idea was, why waste it if there's still valuable resources in it, and build a business model around that. So that's what that team has been working on. And actually, I worked at an investment company and did from pre-seed and on, so until Series A, I was involved with the investment. And interestingly, it's a very local source, so the footprint is very low. And if you process it well, you can get a very interesting fiber out of it. So it's a natural and clean fiber. The fiber can be used in anything from bakery products to soups to sauces. It's a widely used ingredient and a very interesting ingredient to use. But working on this company, one of the founders of Tekkoo saw this is quite difficult. We're one of the few that are doing this yet. How can we transfer those learnings to others? So how can we help others go through a process like this? And a process like this, I think the first idea was 2017. Pilot plant, I have the timeline later, but 17 to 23 and working to a full-scale plant. So somewhere between 5 and 8 years, and then everything goes quite well, is common for a business model like this. Whilst in software, it's sometimes a matter of months, like we're seeing in some AI companies yet, a valuation that explodes within months. But building a factory takes time and is very complex. So some of the products that the peel ingredients end up in, currently I think about 45 employees, their demo plant running full scale, so truckloads of peel coming in and truckloads of food ingredients coming out. So actually, the exponential curve I've put there, and I think I can put it even more to the left. But looking at time, let's say this is a time scale of about 10 years, where you get from a lab phase, to say anything from TRL 3, 4, up until 10. So you have a full-scale plant. But de-risking in that process is capital intensive, because you have to buy steel, and a lot of it. And it's not gradual. So every time you have proven on a certain scale you can produce, you can sell, then the next step is not add another 10%, like we hire a few more engineers and a few more servers, but you have to build a new plant. You have to scale up the technology, you have to scale up the sales you are doing, and a step, let's say 10 times or even more is not uncommon. And every single time, so looking at the situation of Peel Pioneers, I think it was 1 million, 10 million, and looking at something like 30 million and up for a full-scale plan. So those are quite big steps. Also in a investment ecosystem in which there's not too many investors that understand this yet, and you only invest in things you understand. And of course, it's risky and takes time, so makes it less interesting for investors too to get good returns. So quite a challenge. So we took on that challenge. So this is our scope, and this broader model, I think it is quite an interesting one to read a bit about. So it's a model made by Steve Blank, and it's a development process for every company. And interestingly, he takes the perspective of where you are with your customer. So you see the names of those stages is what you are, how you are interacting with your company. So left is your understanding what their problem is and if your solution fits. Then the next step is validating that solution and working on a business model around that. So then you're thinking of like price and actual quality and quantity and all that kind of stuff. And we've translated that to also what type of plant you're building. So a pilot, a demo, commercial, and then more plants or a licensing model. Our scope is really to get from that pilot stage. So most of them are running production on several 100-kilogram scale to demo scale, in which we are really speaking of something you would see as a factory. So tons or kilotons of production. And we've really taken this focus, and I'd say it's not that you're done after this, but this is quite a difficult step. So raising, let's say, up to 1 million and proving your pilot is a difficult one. But then raising 10 to show that on a scale you can actually produce and sell. Running a factory is no easy task. That is a challenging one. So we developed the whole program around these stages. So back at Peel Pioneers, it sort of looked like this. So like I said, in years, the start was it was actually 16. They've projected it, but let's say in 17 they were doing the paperwork. That minimum viable plant was a pilot plant, so running 10 kilotons of operation. Really also getting that operational experience, and then raising that 10 million funding for the current demo plant. And also this road mapping, so really looking at what do you need to do for each of those stages is the framework we developed. And it's really trying to give those entrepreneurs a plan. There's a million things to do, and it's really important to find focus. So actually focusing on the proof you need to make that big step. So is what we've shown here, like all those vertical steps every time is sort of a moment in time where you need to prove to investors that you're ready to build that next phase. That's how we use that road mapping. So in more detail, we do it like this. So the method is called OKR. Google it. Google works with it too. A lot of tech companies work with it. And actually what you do is you state, we're going to build a factory or launch our product or whatsoever, some appealing objective somewhere, let's say a quarter up to a year away. And then you define how you measure if you've met the objective. So looking at this, for customers, you would define that 50% of the oil, so there's oil in those peels, is under an offtake contract. So you go to an investor and you'll say, look, we're ready to build that next scale because already 50% of what we're producing has been sold. And in this case, part of the peel was still going to feed, so animal feed, and they had an offtake contract for 100%. So this is sort of, you show you're ready. Actually, they call this show we can do business. I kind of like that. It's something a team wants to get behind. And then obviously below there's a more detailed plan. So who is doing what and when, but it's really on that sort of tactical level. You're defining this is what we're aiming for to make that next step. So in a bit more detail, this is then the framework we work with. So every time you see there, so in the top you see those stages again. Company building is not here, so we've also defined it for incubation. And every time on these pillars, we call them on the left, you have a certain proof to deliver. And it really helps to focus your efforts. So that is one, and it really helps us in finding expertise around that. And that's also, so looking at the design of the program, it more or less looks like this. So really looking at what do you need to prove and how can we support you in getting those proof points. Would I go into detail here? No, too much detail. So the setup is like this. We do scouting and selection. Actually, it's our second edition. We're looking at a new edition somewhere in 24. So the current group is probably running up until June. We more or less made it a bit of an open-ended model, as 1 year is not enough for most to make that step. So each of those steps, somewhere in the lines of 2.5 to 3 years. So that preparation phase is mostly like a year and a half that we would like to be involved. Success defined by raising an investment round. But somewhere in 24, we'll start this process again. I think, well, scouting and selection probably speaks for itself, but in due diligence, so what investors see as sort of doing their homework, really trying to understand what a company is doing, where they stand and what challenges are ahead. That's what we've just finished. So we call that the due diligence weeks. We did that from September to somewhere in November. So it's really looking into those companies. Where do you currently stand and what do you need to do? And with that, building that roadmap. Then part of that, and also currently, is that we're showing them companies that have made it, or at least that are some steps ahead and are really transferring their knowledge and experience. But also hands-on support, so really seeking expertise, so there can be technical expertise. We recently had sessions in which their pilots are challenged, up until we linked them to experienced founders or CEOs of companies, people that are into early stage selling. We recently did a session on storytelling, so it's not only what you say, but also how and to whom. So on all those parts, we're trying to find the right expertise to really get them to that next phase. So like I showed you in here visually, it's a bit more attractive. This is what we focus on. So we see this as the key pillars on which you need to make progress. And for each of these, we define where you are and where you need to be to raise the next financing round. But you see it there, you work simultaneously on these 6 topics. Being an entrepreneur is not easy. That's also what we're really trying to create in that ecosystem. So also having that peer-to-peer interaction, really having people share their experiences and work together. Yeah, I'd say it really helps to find that peer support and really be on this trip together. Most teams are somewhere around 5 to 15 people, so quite a lot of people involved. And especially that interaction of all people that have this more or less same challenge, but also the same vision for a new economy is really inspiring. They're cool. They're fun people to work with. So a bit about our ecosystem. So experience on the left side is what we consider very important. It's companies that have a circular business model and are a few steps ahead. So really transferring those experience to our participants. And on the other side, we have an expert network. So as you see, we consider ourselves experts. But there's a company with lawyers involved. There's technical expertise involved. So yeah, with that way, we're really trying to create that system around the participants for them to lean on. And obviously, having a strong network is an important factor for success. And not on this slide, but also we have quite a good network in the capital market. So investors are quite closely connected to the program, and we're really trying to link companies to investors also at a very early stage. So it's very good to know each other as early as possible, because most of the time a process from a introduction to actual money in the bank is something between 9 and 12 months. So it's very important to make those introductions early and really allow them to get to know one another. So is Circular Factory for you? So there might be people amongst the crowd here today that are interested, or at least have the ambition to build a circular factory, or maybe already working on their business. So I think the last or the bottom two, they're bold, not for no reason. Understanding that customer problem and providing a great solution, and ready to raise an investment for a demo factory. Contact details are on the last slide, so definitely get in touch if you're working on something. Always interested in getting to know possible participants, but also experts. So if you have certain expertise or whatsoever, be welcome to join our ecosystem. So previous participants, a little overview. So on the left side, there's a Biofilica that works on a leather-like material, so a bio-based leather-like material. Blue Blocks materials made out of seaweed. Nature's Principles, we also invested in them, so they produce lactic acid, but in a very sustainable way. And I see their deadlines. Not many of them have made those deadlines, so that's how difficult it is. Yeah, I see it hasn't been updated. So I think for most of them, it's at least a year in delay. And it's the reason that entrepreneurs can keep going. They're always optimistic about the future, even though in practice, it turns out a bit different, but all of them except one are really on track towards that demo factory. So still supporting them. This is our current group. So right bottom, an alternative to plastics. Middle bottom, an alternative for palm oil. What else do we have? So packed packaging is also quite an interesting model. Instead of throwing glass away, they wash it and reuse it. So obviously it takes quite some gas to recycle glass. So they see a model in which it's not recycled but reused. So definitely a very circular business model. So just an overview, and a quite small group. So there's quite some accelerators that have like anything from 10 to 20 participants. But if you really want that close interaction and really want that focus on these companies, at least in our opinion, you go for a smaller group. So 6 last year and 6 this year. So always welcome to contact me in this case. Have a look at our website. There's quite some interesting information about participants, but also about the companies that support us financially. So that's our model. We actually get financing from companies that see, an organization that see the need for a circular economy, and especially an ecosystem around building companies in that circular economy. Yeah, hopefully starting somewhere around summer with scouting for new participants. So feel free to be in touch. And as I understood, there's room for questions, so definitely open to answer your questions. But thanks for your time and attention for today. And hopefully sort of this plants a seed for your entrepreneurial ambitions, and we'll see you join at some point. Would be really cool.
Thank you very much, Bart. I will give you a real hand, and there are also some virtual hands. So thanks for your presentation. Very inspiring in terms of. I think it's great that you try to help all these people with all kinds of brilliant ideas to actually make it into a commercial setup and to a real business model, let's say. And I can imagine that, well, there are lots of people that have these ideas, but they don't have any experience with setting up a business or getting financing in, or the legal issues, etc. So it's great that you guys try to help people with that. The floor is indeed open for questions. So if you have a question, just raise your virtual hand. But I'll just start with a question myself. So I was wondering. So if you would have to define a circular factory, I see that a lot of the topics that you describe and a lot of the startups that you mentioned are indeed related to organic materials, right? The glass was maybe the only exception that I saw on the slides, at least. So I'm just wondering, because there could also be all kinds of other topics related to metals, or I don't know, battery recycling or reuse or things like that. Are those outside of the scope of your initiatives, or?
No, they're not. Yeah, actually, sort of these organic streams or forms of waste or side streams is what we see most within companies. I do know companies that do forms of metal recycling and or quite complex metals too, and the same goes for batteries. Yeah, I don't know any that do that in the Netherlands. So yeah, quite interestingly, of the 12 participants, there's 5 in circular food ingredients.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually our financiers ask us, like, what does this say about the ecosystem? Sort of what is happening and what are we missing or whatsoever? But it's quite difficult because it's such a small group of companies that are doing this that it's hard to come up with sort of general conclusions. But yeah, definitely open to anything else. And circular is also quite broadly defined. We've had some interesting discussions previously on what defines circular, but let's say impact first. That is the most important thing to consider.
Yeah, because I think that when I teach circular economy to students, I always say, well, circular economy is a means to an end and not a goal in itself, because the goal in the end is sustainability, or let's read environmental impact. Those types of goals can be real goals, but circularity in itself is not a goal, except for maybe making sure that you don't waste materials or that you don't use new raw materials, etc. So would you agree with that? And then also, of course, the point is that in these alternatives or in these startups that you guide through this whole process, is there also a point where you, for example, try to quantify, let's say, the environmental gain that they create by their own processes?
We very much do that. So here, one of the pillars is impact. Actually, quite interestingly, so that sort of says it quite a lot of the group. We asked them if they need support on working on an LCA or actually getting that insights into impact. All of them had that. So in that sense, means to an end. It's quite interesting for them, all of them, The goal is to work on those transitions. Doesn't always help you with your business model, as you should start with a relevant problem in the market versus a sort of tech or product push strategy. Yeah, for all of them, it's that impact first. I'm trying to think of models that we've had discussions about, but maybe also looking at one of the previous participants works with spent beer grain. So what stays over after brewing, and there's quite a lot of protein and fiber in it, but it goes to feed mostly. And a higher usage would be food, so for human consumption. But obviously you need a lot of energy to get the water out from the spent beer grain. So that's really when an LCA comes into place. Like, would you still send it out as a wet cake to feed? Or does it make sense to use gas to dry it? And even more complex, looking at recent gas and electricity, but also materials prices, do you make a choice for the short term to go for a sustainable drying process, which is more expensive in the short run and way more expensive? Or do you go with your sustainable vision and go for the opposite? So yeah, that is there's difficult dilemmas in being very sustainable and circular for sure.
Yeah, thanks. And it's logical that these dilemmas are there, but I think it's important to also indeed give it the attention that it requires, let's say, because there are going to be all kinds of interesting plans that don't really contribute to sustainability in a sense, and it might still be a business model, right? I mean, it might still be something that you can make money with, but in the end, you're not actually improving the environmental impact of the whole system so much. But I think it's great that you actually give specific attention to that. And I think that's also very, very needed. Yeah.
There's no greenwashing in our program allowed, not for sure.
No, but I mean, the thing is that I've seen a lot of startups, and I've also been involved with a lot of people that have interesting ideas that are really with the best intentions, trying to create a business out of something, and they really want to contribute to sustainability. So that's it's not that they're aiming for greenwashing, but they just have an idea that, well, if you just do the math, let's say, it doesn't add up in terms of sustainability, and then they don't realize it, and it can be very frustrating also, because then somebody comes in. We often say that as industrial ecologists, we are often the party poopers, because we come in with our calculations and we show that the environmental benefits might not be as big as people might think it is, and that's a sad message, but it's also an important message.
Yeah, it's something like with recycling glass. You feel well when you throw that into the recycling bin. Though imagine the amounts of energy needed to bring that back into a bottle. Yeah, it's you have to do the math to actually see and quantify that impact for sure.
Yeah, thanks. Sander, you raised your hand.
Yes. Well, thanks for the presentation. I also had a question about the quantification. So since all those circular companies in a way rely on, well, secondary materials or waste flows, I was wondering to what extent it is a barrier also for them to have information about, well, the quality or the quantity of waste that is available to them. Can you say something about that? Is that part of their challenge to find information about it?
Yeah, it's the same like I stated with the peels. It's quite difficult to see where waste streams are. And in some cases also you need to manage where they to actually source them. So it's an added complexity. It's not that you can easily buy it. So one of the current participants uses wool. So try to understand the wool ecosystem, how to source it and actually get it to you. But then also in these waste streams, it's quite interesting that people see it as sort of a new form of gold. And then you get who pays the most. So it's quite complex as it's finite sources. So it's really needed to understand what you're working with, and maybe like looking at the glass recycling. There's quite some companies are working on different packaging materials, like plastics, because they have a smaller footprint and are more interesting also to consumers. So actually, your source of feedstock is shrinking there. So definitely sort of quantifying it is a very needed one. But
Yeah.
quality, it's the same. Like, you're not buying a virgin material. And that's why we also challenge them in, like, use different feedstock sources on your process to really understand the quality. And it's obviously under perfect conditions, everything works. But in practice, nothing is perfect. So feedstock is well, it's here on the left. It's the first and foremost. It's a very complex one in a circular economy.
Yeah. Yeah, I see. So also in circular economy, there's really this competition. So if one startup starts using a waste flow, then it might, well, attract others and the price goes up, is what you're saying. And the other thing that companies might reduce the waste flow. So that's then, yeah, that's quite tricky, I can imagine, if you're making a business case.
And especially now with anything that has sort of a sugary content. So in fermentation, sugars are very interesting. And you're starting to see this fight, more or less. So from the orange peel production, there's also obviously still some juice in it. So it's also sugary. And you can actually sell it to quite a lot of companies. And prices are going up. So on the one hand, companies are you're reducing waste in your process, and the prices of those waste streams go up. So yeah, some challenges ahead, that is for sure. But maybe, let's say, in the end, to all of us, it would be good if waste streams are as small as possible. So in that sense, it benefits us all in the end.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. I was also wondering, you were mentioning that I saw that InvestNL was on your one of your slides, and you are also mentioning that you are, well, as quickly as possible trying to involve investors also with these companies, because in the end, of course, you need also the funding. Now I know that I didn't see any banks in your, or is that in your list of investors that it was not on that slide?
No, banks don't like risk. So they do some small loans, but that's sort of money that has been written off yet. So it's more of their do good. Banks. So looking at these phases, maybe they come in as soon as you can very reliably show you what money streams are going out. So a bank, obviously, their business model is just interest. So that's maybe somewhere currently between 7 and 10% or so. So they want certainty. So any form of risk on your production process, or are you able to sell product X for price Y, is what banks dislike. Actually, they want this. They're backward-looking. Investors are forward-looking. So this is quite a difficulty, and actually banks are struggling with this. And there is it's called in great English, kopgroep circulair financieren. But it's a collective of banks trying to change that way of looking at a company. And actually, if you fill out the company has been in existence for 3 years and has not made a profit, the system will say no immediately. Yeah. So banks are really looking at this sort of development of a new economy and how they can play a role, because their current models don't allow for that.
Yeah. Yeah, I do see some attention when I'm talking to people from banks that they well, banks are not all the same, of course. I know there's one bank that is a corporation in the Netherlands which has a huge fund to actually sponsor all kinds of initiatives, but at the same time, that might not be the kind of funding that you're looking for if you're really looking for investments. But I know there's also a lot of subsidies and all kinds of places that I was not aware of before. I was kind of I'm a member of a committee that also looks at subsidies for the city of Leiden, where you have kind of all kinds of circular initiatives. And it's small money. I mean, it's not big money, but what I notice is that there's a lot of other funds that are available for startups to actually get some seed money from. So that's probably also something that you look into in the very early phases of development.
Yeah, and let's say anything up to 1 million. So there's also the Just Transition Fund that has been launched. There's quite some, especially governmental money, but the private market is not there yet. So there's not many that great successes yet. And great success is defined by you put your money in and you get it back tenfold. That's where investment funds are looking at. So for anything, let's say 3, 4, 5 million and up, you have to go abroad. So there's some European funds that are active in this space, but as we refer to them technically, asset heavy is not a big segment yet for investors. And it's a pity, and it's something like we speak to that about the InvestNL. We speak to the investment community, so we have a collective of impact investors that we work with. But in the end, that's also pension funds and insurance companies that are sort of in that top of the market providing that capital that are not so willing to risk things like that. But in the end, obviously, the returns are way bigger than just that financial one, because I'm near the Rotterdam harbor looking at the resources coming in every day. It's very unsustainable, and we need to be circular in, what is it, 26 years from now? I think most of you are somewhere around that age, so it's quite a short lifespan to completely turn around an economy. So if you have a couple of million, call us.
Thanks. I have one final question from my side, at least, and that is: so you're helping all these businesses to grow, let's say, and to flourish. But what is your own business model as Tekkoo?
In general, like I said, we also work for bigger companies, both public and private. So that is part of our business model. And in this, we get some funding. That's how we fund ourselves. So there's models, obviously, in which you can take a stake in companies. There's also models in which you can have participants pay. But so far, we've been able to get it in sort of a sponsorship. So that's how we run the current program. But
sponsorship. So where is the funding then coming from? So you have to find a sponsor for helping the companies, or
Yeah. So the program management, all the experts, and all of that is paid through our partners. So looking at so there's InvestNL, there's Renewy, there's also the Doen Foundation, it's called. It's from the National Lottery, or the Postcode Loterij. So they're I think they're one of the biggest foundations in the world, actually. So they're actually giving us those means to run this program for each year. We're looking at different models. We're also looking at opportunities to go more European. We don't see too many competing programs, and we see the need bigger than just the Netherlands. So looking at that. So second edition running, let's say we're building our demo plan, so ready to scale.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Thanks again. I don't see any further hands raised, so I think it's great that you guys are doing this, and I'm really happy to see that you can help so many companies to set up their own shop, their own business. And I think that's something that really needed. And I think also I can really also see how it will help these companies to also talk to each other and have these creative workshops, because I all run into similar problems and similar issues. So I can imagine how that is very helpful, but also I think maybe good for their ease of mind to see that they're not the only ones struggling with all these different issues. So yeah, thanks for stepping into that gap that is basically there for these startups to progress and to make real businesses out of this. So yeah, great.
I must admit, looking back like a couple of years when I was working at an investment company, I couldn't have thought this would be my job. So it's I'm quite honored to do so, and it's like all these people are working towards that same vision. So it's very rewarding to work with them for sure.
Yeah, I can really imagine that, and that is also something that we take also into our own jobs. Of course, is that it's great to be working on something if you have a very good feeling about it. I mean, if you think that you can contribute at least your little part on changing the world a little bit. So that's I can imagine that's a lot nicer than just being in an investment firm.
Yeah, and none of the, well, I was in impact investing, so that helps. But it's definitely a different role. But also looking at the participants, none of them has the ambition to become rich. All of them have the ambition to build a very impactful company. So that is just a great attitude to see, and they're putting in a lot of effort. So yeah, it's hats off for them for sure.
Yeah, and hats off for you also to help them. So thank you again for joining us. And yeah, I'd just like to say to everybody that is here, but also everybody that will listen to this maybe a little bit later, because it's all recorded, of course. So I hope you have a great holidays, and hope to see you next year for the new series of circular industry talks. So thanks again, Bart, and yeah.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for your attention today, and I hope all of you have some time off in the coming weeks. So really enjoy that, and yeah, thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Okay. Bye bye.
Okay, bye bye.